Hello, hola, buena tarde, gracias a todos por venir, gracias a todos por venir. Thanks everyone for coming, especially at this early hour. We know like 3 p.m. on the second day of a festival is like we are starting kind of like in a way engage again with our bodies, which are very important tools.
And our brains.
And our brains, exactly. So thanks for joining us in this coming back to reality conversation that we're going to have about something that I think we feel kind of like passionate about in different ways and have a relationship with, which is, and it's not necessarily super intuitive, or it's not something that I have heard discussed in the context of music conference a lot, which is its relationship with space. And actually, and to what extent today, the way that we think about the music experience also includes a space in multiple dimensions. My name is Jose Luis de Vicente. I live and work in this town. I work in a big building that I'm going to show you now. It's like, can we go from presentation to presentation?
We rehearsed this.
We rehearsed it, yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm the director of Design Hub Barcelona, the hub, which is Barcelona's center and museum for design, architecture, urbanism, and and innovation. Is this massive big building in the center of the Square of Glorias. Now I'm going to show you the future. This is the future. This is, you know, this for the people in this town, this square has been under renovation for 15 years. The works are finishing this year.
Any day now.
Any day now. So this is like, in terms of record, this is like more eagerly awaited than a Daft Punk reunion or something. and in terms of architecture, it's interesting because this square, Plaza de las Glorias, sits in the center of the three big avenues of the city, Meridiana, Gran Via, and Diagonal, and actually was the heart of what Ildefonso Cerdà, the master planner who defined not only the shape of modern Barcelona, but to a certain extent the science of cities, of urbanism, to be the heart of the city. So actually, we are very happy to kind of like work in this institution from the heart of the city. I wanted to show you just a project that we did this year because I think it's relevant to what we're going to talk today. It is the work of an English collective, United Visual Artists, who became well known for their very strong collaborative relationship with the UK seminal band Massive Attack. And in their work with Massive Attack, they kind of like develop a new approach to the presence on stage, where actually musicians and performers would appear lying out against a backdrop of lights, and they would develop like really innovative techniques, like as you're seeing in this piece, which is reminiscent of the work with them, data flows from the city in which a concert was taking place. So actually the visuals would talk to the events in the culture of the city in which the band were playing that night. UVA then move on to do their own work outside of the context of the stage, as long as they were working in the stage, and develop a language where light, sound, information, data kind of like produces these constant choreographies. And this show that we did in February, Patterns and Recognitions, to me was about how not only music has been a driver of experience in multiple ways, but actually the languages in which you have thought and imagined spaces for music, and the languages that are adjacent to it, from architecture to light design to scenography, are influencing and have been influencing multiple other cultures today in wider spaces. Not only from what happens on the stage, but how what has been happening on the stage and the spaces in which music happens has been filtering and filters in contemporary culture in multiple other contexts. There is no sound without space. There is no sound in space, but also there is no sound with space. This is very obvious. The most, if we kind of like rethink about our physics, pure expression of music is the reverberation of a mechanical wave that expands through a medium and then bounces back on surfaces, producing reverberation. This, as you know, is an anechoic chamber, which is the only kind of rooms in the world where there is no reverberation. So in a way, it's interesting that we have not necessarily thought so much when we are engaging in the experience of music around the reverberating space, that is, those walls against which sound hits and then actually produces the communal experience of having music manifest itself in the presence of all of us. And I think that's an increasingly interesting way of looking at how the spaces of music, the sociology of music happens in this very strict relationship with architecture and with the shaping of design on a space in multiple ways. Music has always been tied, of course, to spaces and to venues, and it has always been a kind of like connected the experience of music to how design decisions presented. Probably many of you have read this book. It's David Byrne's very famous How Music Works book. And in this book, there is a great chapter on the relationship between space architecture and music, in which he thinks about the beginning of Talking Heads playing at CBGB in New York at the mid-70s. And then he would lay out this floor plan of CBGB and try to understand how did the club actually work. And to what extent the experience of producing the scene there, this club that became seminal and historically so important, was very much determined by things like how was actually the stage position, what was the relationship with the entrance and the flow of people, where were the toilets, where was the bar, and actually you see like on the right his proposal for improving the design of CBGB in an act where the musician, also the performer, becomes an architect and kind of like proposes how that space could actually be rethought in other and multiple forms to also kind of like define the experience of music in a context like this one. Maybe you know, I'm sure you know the image on the right. This might have been like the most important or influential or let's say shiny venue that opened in the last 12 months. It is of course the Sphere in Las Vegas. Maybe you don't know the one on the right. The one on the right is, here you're seeing down in the image, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen at the Expo exhibition in Osaka in 1970, presenting the first of his proposals for a spherical auditorium, an auditorium where speakers are distributed around 30 points in space, and then sound would break the linear hierarchy of sound coming frontally from an Italian stage positioned to left and right. Stockhausen was a master of rethinking the possibilities of combining space, experience, and sound. I saw him once played at Sonar, the festival that was my alma mater, so we are kind of like also old and we are also engaging with this story. Why I'm showing this, because actually there's like a historical continuity between the images and the ideas that Stockhausen and other pioneers of architecture and space, like also, for instance, Xenakis, thought about in the 60s, 70s, and how this ended up producing an ideas for new forms of venues that also experiment with its architectural disposition, but also become a platform in the sense that the Sphere is an interesting example because these are not a place where you will just position an external experience of a concert, but becomes a software platform in a way, a tool to which we think and actually kind of like reimagine what a concert might be made of, what the relationship between sound, image, light, and the position of a space is important. There is one thing here, for instance, that is a bit under discussed, which is that, as you know, maybe you don't know, but the Sphere has no PA. There is no sound coming from a central mass of speakers, but the speakers are embedded within seats, more than 15,000 different speakers. So that completely changes, reimagines the architecture of how sound reaches you in a venue. We are starting to think more and more about the cultural history of spaces for music and spaces like the club. Irene from Temporary Pleasure, actually, she kind of like belongs to a structure that is researching this and put out a book last year, which is actually really nice.
You read it?
Yeah, which is like a catalog of a history of the club as an architectural space. And architects like Paul Esteve, Catalan architects based in the UK, has been doing a very big kind of like body of work around the nightclub as an architectural kind of like entity. And I think we're starting to kind of like understand the future of clubs and clubbing by understanding its history and its past and the way that we have engaged with music in those spaces and how democratic they are, how vertical they are, how they renegotiate kind of like the engaging possibilities between those who are there. I think it's a fascinating place. The history of the club in architecture is, in a way, starting to be written in multiple ways. I was doing my homework yesterday night, of course, so at 3 a.m. I was at Justice. And again, I worked for many years at Sonar, and something that I learned in Sonar was that electronic music has this incredible challenge possibility, which is producing presence where there is no presence. Like when the musician, the performer becomes just and lead person hiding behind a console, our notions of spectacle needs and reclaims and requires to replace that with something that has to be present. And by the way, there is no possibility of no presence. Maybe one of the most spectacular shows of this last year in Barcelona was Otegre,
Otegre.
Otegre, playing at Apollo during Mutec. Otegre are well known because when they play, they have to play pitch black, absolutely no light, in a total absence of light. And of course, that's an incredible tool of presence. So the languages of electronic music, I think in the last 30 years have been pushing very much to the forward the possibility of imagining a liquid transient architecture of light and smoke and movement as a replacement of presence in a traditional stage. And it has been a big driver of innovation in this context. To the point that we are in an age where we're starting to have architectures and designers who are becoming brand names in the relationship between those who are producing new experiences of the stage. Of course, S. Devlin being probably the most famous one today. Here are two examples of her work for Kanye West, and the one on the left where in one show Kanye was in his megalomaniac appearing as this towering figure on a mountain. The most spectacular one is the one on the right, which I still think is one of the most radical innovations that I've seen in stage design in the last 25 years, was this tour where literally the stage was floating over the audience. So not only was breaking the relationship between stage and audience, but actually it was kind of like putting the music venue upside down with the stage floating over the space. In the 1960s, some of the most famous and important radical voices of architecture imagined other forms of architecture as presence in society. As we were kind of like reinforcing the idea that architecture is not just about solid buildings of brick and steel and concrete. And Archigram, and the Beatles of architecture, as they were called in the 60s, among their most famous projects presented this idea of the instant city, which is a city that literally takes over an empty space, produces a temporary community, uses malleable dynamic media like video, like images, like inflatables, and then disappears later. Probably music festivals. Music festivals are today kind of like the realization to a certain extent of Archigram's ideas about the instant city, and there is no festivals without architecture. So this is how I think we wanted to kind of like contextualize a bit of this conversation. And now we're going to hear from David. David is the dean at the IE School of Architecture and Design in this one. You want this one? Okay. In Madrid. And as we change the presentation, actually, they have been the ones who suggested the idea of this session and kind of like wanted to emphasize this relationship between architecture, music, and live music today. So thanks actually for gathering us here today.
Thank you.
And he's also a music lover like all of us. So I'm sure he has a lot to say about this intersection.
Thanks. Well, as I will vamp as I wait for the controller. So it's a pleasure to be here. What I'm going to do today, when the presentation eventually appears, and I have the controller in my hand, is to talk about, less about club culture actually, and more about, let's say, the overlapping or the tensions between the individual, the collective, and the atmosphere of the music event, be it let's say a rave, be it a large concert, be it classical, opera, whatever it might be. But that one of the things that I want to talk about eventually is the way that architectural space, which I think we tend to think of as being authored by the architect. And as an architect, it pains me slightly to say this, in many ways it's way more interesting when it's part of the collective construction of the event, right? And less a top-down imposition that comes from the architect who says this, right? And this is not such a new idea necessarily. And what I'm going to show you is that a bit. So if we could have the presentation.
Yes, we're almost there.
But I guess one thing I will add to this, is that when we put it in historical context, just to say that it's not new doesn't mean that it's less important, right? And as someone who's kind of worked in history, often it's actually really, thank you, saying something's been done before is a way of kind of helping us understand where things can go, or maybe things that we've missed, right? We've missed about the way that we categorize things. I'll talk about Altamont in a second. Altamont, people kind of use Altamont as shorthand for the end of the idealistic Woodstock dream, which happened a few months after Woodstock, right? And I think we actually, when we take it out of context and we don't have the full historical context, whoops, let's go back here. When we don't have the full historical context, we miss part of the the story. 1 second, bear with us, please. Okay, all right. Well, we'll start with John Travolta. This is a good place to start as any. And I'll start with this because this is my first cinematic experience in life. I was 2.5 years old, and for some reason, my Belarusian-born grandmother thought it was a great idea to take me to see this movie in a theater. And if you've seen the movie recently, it's really not something you should take a 2-year-old to see. But the only thing that stuck with me, and I will say conclusively, I was sure that adulthood would involve lights in the floor. That's the only thing I remembered, right? Lights in the floor. When I'm grown up, there will be lights in the floor. And that was sort of this idea of a highly authorial space. I had never seen lights in the floor before, let alone a mirror ball, which I didn't even have a name for. It was just a ball that was sparkly. So as a 2-year-old, this is what struck, right? This odd space. But I want to jump back because this is, obviously a space that was designed, right? But let's jump back 10 years before to another film, Jacques Tati's Playtime, which I didn't see at 2 years old. And the climactic scene of the film, which is like 45 minutes long, is in this restaurant, the Palace Garden restaurant. And it begins with this stuffy, kind of ridiculous interior. The architect is there at the right, scribbling out, because the building hasn't yet been completed, right? There's this sort of mambo band on the stage. And as the night goes on, things begin to get progressively more out of hand until the ceiling caves in on Monsieur Hulot. We see one of the protagonists of the film, an American tourist, begin to play the piano. Okay? And there's an exposed brick wall. So gradually this architect-designed world is falling apart. The audience is becoming the performer. The ambience completely changes. And in the final scene, we have the American tourist sitting at the piano, literally being the one who's performing. She came there to consume. She's now producing part of it, and the room is fallen apart, and it's way more interesting as a space. The architect, and again, self-defeating as the architect to say it, the architect is no longer even here, not even trying to fix all the chaos that has ensued. So in the beginning of this 45-minute scene, we move from, let's say, an atmosphere that's consumed. The floor will have lights because someone decided there will be lights in the floor, to one that's constructed by the audience, which is way more interesting and way richer. Now I want to go to another understanding of the collective, because this is an idea that collective makes the space. Well, for any of you who've seen the Beatles, the Get Back documentary, the kind of, one of the heroes of the documentary is Michael Lindsay Hogg, who's here in the sport coat, who proposes like 16 different times, why don't we have the concert here at this Roman amphitheater in Libya? And John and Paul are kind of like, yeah, that sounds great. But they never really, they don't go along with it at any point, right? And you kind of wonder, well, why weren't they interested in it? And I would posit, well, because they basically already did that. Yeah. The Shea Stadium is sort of like the contemporary version of the Roman amphitheater. They'd already done like teeny tiny Beatles on a teeny tiny stage in a very large building, right? They had done that. They had that relationship with the audience. I mean, clearly a Roman amphitheater is slightly nicer than Shea Stadium, but teeny tiny Beatles, teeny tiny stage. So this was this idea of like, okay, there's this huge collective. I could be in front of this huge collective, or I could do something else, which is to be on the roof of the building that we own with like 6 people in the audience. But there is a collective, right? There's a collective that's all of London listening to them.
And the passersby.
Passing by, hearing it, and they knew that everybody would know it was them, and then they knew that this was going to be in film, so it would be it would be an event that would live on maybe even longer than being in the Roman amphitheater. And this is kind of the implied collective. You don't have to see it. They didn't have to see an audience to know that they would have one, which is sort of like us talking into the void of Zoom, right? I mean, people are listening, but you may not be able to see them. Okay, I want to jump ahead, or jump back, rather, get back, to another era of opera and the idea of the audience. These are 2 different opera halls. This is La Scala in Milan, from the 18th century. This is 100 years later. This is Garnier in Paris. The halls are superficially similar. I mean, one is more Baroque than the other, more or less the same size. But if you compare the sections of them, and here I'm going to get architecty, the actual hall here, I can't point, but the hall is actually sort of, not the big change. What the change is, first of all, a huge technical space behind it, because the production's got more interesting. But look how much lobby space there is. The lobby space was important. Here's the beautiful lobby of La Scala, and here's the entry stair at the Garnier Opera in Paris. What's changed is you're kind of here to see opera, but you're really here to be seen. And the building expresses that. So it's like, I want the building to reflect back me, right? And I think we see this attitude a lot. This is from the Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour. and the bracelets are activated, which is a technology we've had for a while, but, and she says at one point, look at you, right? Look at you is the point, like the point is you, the point is not me, which is false modesty, of course, on Taylor's part, but it's there, right? Look at you, and there's this idea that the collective is itself important, we should look at ourselves. Okay, another aspect of the scenic architecture, if we go back to the Renaissance, these are 2 engravings from Sebastiano Serlio's 5 books of architecture. It's actually 7 in Italian, only 5 in English. Don't ask me why. We lost 2 of them in translation. But he talks about how there has to be a kind of architecture to put people in the mood for a certain kind of production. So if you're going to do a comedy, it needs to be asymmetrical. So the left hand, you have the scenic architecture for comic attitudes. And on the other side, on the right side, you see the tragic scene, bilateral symmetry. This is going to be a tragedy. So there's something in the spatial configuration that gets you in the mood, right? And this is the 15th century. So we could call these themed atmospheres, maybe, like stuff that gets you in the mood. Here we're looking at a photograph, which is not from The Shining, but actually from the Aragon Ballroom, which was meant to be some kind of Spanish village pastiche, which was a dance club in Chicago during the Prohibition era, where the sky was filled with lights, and it would transport you to being in some romanticized vision of a Spanish village, right, in the north side of Chicago. It's not actually so different from the Hacienda, which was done by Factory Records in Manchester in the 80s, which was kind of industrial themed. It was meant to get you, it wasn't actually a factory, right, but that yellow and black, that famous yellow and black pattern kind of transported you to an industrial atmosphere. Not so different from being transported to the Spanish village, right? Okay, great minds think alike, and we do too.
Yep.
So here we have another aspect of the collective, and this is what I'm calling utopian atmospheres. Like there was in this idea of the instant city, the kind of punchline of the whole thing is, this thing comes to a village, they have this festival, the festival leaves, but the cultural imprint remains, and the people are somehow changed by it. And yes, okay, so we talk about the idea of the kind of utopian collective of Woodstock, and this is, the usually considered to be the end point, security by Hell's Angels, always a good idea. And so, I mean, we typically say, well, that was the end of the utopian experiment, but the 20,000 people standing in a field continues, right? And Glastonbury, and to some extent where we are now, is that utopian ideal of this event, where something special happens and there's a remaining footprint. Okay, let's talk about the cathartic collective, and I'll be wrapping up. Catharsis is a Greek word, right, that has to do with kind of this experience, individual or collective, that purifies and leads you to some kind of higher state of consciousness. So the cathartic collective, this is Epidaurus, which was actually like a medical center of the time, right? You'd go for a complete like spa treatment, which involved musical theater, and you'd have this giant experience with many other people, and then you'd go off to your room and have dreams that were supposed to be informed by that experience. I think we can make a link between what was at the time the most expensive, most technologically advanced collective experience, Radio City Music Hall, New York City. And Rem Koolhaas writes about it as the lighting basically transformed the idea of night and day, which any of us who have been up most of the night with lights, right? This is one of the potentials, that it kind of alters our biological rhythms of what is day, what is night. And he talks about there being these sunrises and sunsets over the course of a performance, which transports us, right? Transports us through days, through time. And I do think there's a direct link, and once again, Jose Luis, you and I think alike. Yeah. There's a link, right, between this Radio City Music Hall experience of the early 20th century with this experience of the first quarter of the 21st century, right? This consuming environment, which is a cathartic collective experience. Now, there's another link we can make between the sphere and, let's say, the distracted globe, which is the virtual space of Ready Player One, right? This is the bar where our heroes meet, but it's not actually in physical space. The laws of gravity don't apply, just like Kanye floating. Yeah. And this will bring us back to Do, a deer, a female deer, which is it's a space of encounters, right? Where we come together in physical space or virtual space. But actually, I want to end with this, which is the individual experience of the Feelies. And I don't mean the band from New Jersey, who are excellent, but that's not the topic today. We're going to talk about the Feelies very briefly in Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, who talks about this drug-fueled experience that we have individually. The name of the work that they're watching is 3 weeks in a helicopter and all singing, synthetical talking, colored, stereotopic feely with synchronized scent organ accompaniment. That's the name of the work they're watching, in which case the collective is utterly unimportant, right? You're having this experience informed by some virtual technology imagined by Huxley at the beginning of the 20th century, which is kind of the end of this collective experience. And maybe one thing we can talk about is how do we avoid this tragic end? Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
It's me.
Thank you for this catalog. Like there is this classically say species of spaces, for species of communities and species of spaces for communities. I think it's very important that we actually think of these environments as actually as enablers of relation and community. Irene, sorry, I'm wearing my contacts, so I cannot. Oh, I'm listening there. Can you say your name because I don't want to mess it up?
Irene Vasanelli.
Valinellis.
Yeah.
It's one of the members of Temporary Pleasure, a collective whose work I follow with fascination for a certain amount of time because their work not only talks about the architecture of the club, but actually in a way I think it embeds some of the DIY punk ethos of actually clubs being spaces and parties and institutions like the rave who are very much kind of like spaces of empowerment where you don't only need to be a client or consumer, but also can be a participant, a producer, and a shaper. And that has led them to produce workshops where they develop temporary clubs that are designed by the participants to develop installations, parties, and as I said before, they have put out a book that is one of the first kind of like looks at the history of the club as an institution. So thank you, Irene, for
Thank you. I don't need to make my presentation now. Yeah, so the collective was actually born out of, in the context of the Irish nightlife crisis. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but a lot of nightclubs closed down in Ireland in the past 10, 20 years. There are not a lot of spaces for music, live music to be enjoyed, and it's just become really difficult for grassroots movements or grassroots organizations to have spaces and platforms to actually go out and enjoy club culture. That paired with this sense of hyper commercialization of club spaces and hyper individualism, this pattern that we've seen that got exacerbated in the pandemic, I think, this isolated, like individualistic pattern that we saw, and social media taking over the club experience and the festival experience, kind of inspired the collective to be created and look at how can we create club spaces in a more collective, democratic, DIY way. And in terms of how we work and approach design, oh, that's black. Nothing.
Dance break time.
No thoughts, yeah.
I'll take rest.
Just vibes. We like to hack construction systems and materials. I was asked about sustainability earlier. We like to rent, reuse. We think about what happens to our temporary installations after they've been activated, because a lot of what we do is ephemeral and it only exists for a very short period of time. We also work a lot on subverting the typical masculinity of construction and architecture. So we're very femme, we're very queer. We don't like to take ourselves too seriously. We like to create comfortable spaces where people can express themselves freely and feel safe. And yeah, just try and keep a sense of humor and good vibes all around. We developed this workshop. We started developing it a couple of years ago. The first one was here in Barcelona. And we gathered a group of local participants and we asked them to design and build a club space in a week. We asked them basically what makes a club. So what are the fundamental things when you boil it down to that you need to create enjoyable, safe club experience. And it's always, in all of the iterations that we've had of it in different cities around Europe, it's always been really rich to see a group of people of different backgrounds, different abilities, different skill sets. So we're talking about DJs, we're talking about artists, promoters, like people who work in the local scene, creating their own nights and managing their own programs, come together and create this utopian space, temporary space that caters to all the needs of someone going to have a club experience could need, that we felt like mainstream club spaces, no offense Apollo, or Primavera Sound, were lacking or had grown to lack, like for whatever reason. We focused on these we distilled it down to these three themes or three components. Space being the more architectural aspect, the physical expression. We asked questions like, where does the music happen? Where does the dancing happen? Where does the talking happen, or the resting, or the smoking? How do we flow from the bar to the dance floor to the toilets? Where do the conversations happen in the line waiting for your coat? And we also looked at program, what happens in the club, how do we platform local artists, how do we democratize the programming, how do we make it more with a ground-up approach, and then ethos, which we grew to understand as what does the club stand for, or what does it represent, what do we care about, and why? And then how do we communicate that to people who are coming to the club? Is it visualized in the space? Is it communicated beforehand on social media or with flyers or a text message? And then the whole point being everyone coming to the club already know what to expect, and they know what will be tolerated and what won't be tolerated, and the kind of community that they're going to be a part of and what they need to be conscious of. The end result is a temporary club space that these people have built in a week. Everyone gets hands-on with the actual creation of the space, with the programming, as I said, and then we get to celebrate it in this very joyful way, actually dancing and experiencing the club. So far, they've been open for one day, and then they disappear the next day. So this idea of ephemerality is really key in the work that we do, because we feel like creating these temporary spaces and moments in time just elevate that experience. We worked a lot with platforms, this idea of seeing and being seen, elevating the audience, always protagonizing the audience. So I'm going to talk about that next as well. Deplatforming the DJ, basically, and creating a dance floor for dancers. I wanted to share this reference because it inspires us a lot. It's from Horst Festival, which is in Belgium. They have a really serious approach to architecture. So they invite architects every year to design their different stages. And all of these stages, the end result is these very beautifully architecturally designed spaces that are really amazing places to dance and also to serve different functions and different types of programming. This is my personal favorite. It's called the Rotunda by Saluto Bono. I don't know if you know them. And the reason I like it is because it makes a dance floor where all the dancers are facing each other rather than the DJ. We talked a lot about the spectacle of shows now, and it's just like more and more and flashing lights and as crazy as possible. And what we have been trying to do is let the collective of the dancers become the spectacle, and not one dancer in particular, but this group that's greater than the sum of its parts. And if you can see in the bottom corner, of course, the DJ is elevated in this example, but the people in the front row are facing away from the DJ. Like most people on this dance floor are facing this central point. So they've created this like amphitheater where the center of the whole structure is the focal point and all the dancers are dancing together. So you can have these like individual moments, but you're very much part of a collective. And I think this is also something that festivals can start to, or use it as inspiration, because this is a spectacle as well. I think seeing such a group of people dancing together in unison and having this like shared physical experience is just as satisfying to see, or just as electrifying to see, as these like gigantic AI 3D, like that big, you know what I'm talking about, that show with the walking man and the massive screen, like, and this sea of iPhones just pointing in one direction. So I would like to challenge or suggest to festivals like Primavera Sound, to spaces like Sala Apollo, who are very established and have an audience and are evolving in their own way, to stop thinking about stages as stages, and maybe can we start thinking about them as dance floors? Like, can we stop thinking about a stage or a space at a festival that's for a DJ or an artist to be elevated and looked at in a linear way, and can we start thinking about them as spaces where you can go and dance and have a collective experience? I'd also like to play this game, Where is the DJ? I've just got a few examples here. The first one on the top left is our club in Dublin, where we built this multi-story scaffolding structure and created a small room within a larger warehouse space to foster this sense of intimacy. And we tucked the DJ away kind of under this raised dancing platform. And yeah, again, it just generated this great scene of dancers dancing with each other. On the top right is another Horst festival example, another one of my favorite stages that I've been to. This just sea of people in another multi-level scaffolding structure. Don't come after us for the scaffolding. If you can find another reusable, structurally sound, fast space that can be installed system, please let me know. But scaffolding at the moment is so good. This stage was called No One is an Island. And the context of it being, this is the closing set as well by Yob Yobsa, is that how you pronounce it? In 2021, so the first time the festival was back after the pandemic, and the first time I had been in such a throng of people, like a room with all these people together. So you can imagine like the ecstasy of everyone who'd been isolated for so long, suddenly in this huge dance together. And yeah, the DJ's kind of like, you can't even see the DJ. We were just dancing with each other in that scene. On the bottom left-hand side, I mean, this is different. The DJ is still visible, but it's in Tresor in Berlin. But it definitely has this question mark of like, why is the DJ in this caged environment? And I think it's a really interesting suggestion and makes us aware of the DJ, but they're also not on a staged platform. And then the final example is one of the MTV Grind clips from the 90s, where there was no DJ at all in the room, and the spectacle, again, was the dancers, but not one dancer in particular, but all of them. And it just looks like so much fun. I would love to be in one of these videos. So yeah, I would ask this question as well to all of you and to people who are organizing parties, festivals, spaces, and just ask this question, like, what do we do with the DJ? What is the significance of the DJ? Are they just there to sell tickets? Like, can we go back to this more traditional format of club culture where we went to dance and have a collective physical release and not to just like witness a visual spectacle where maybe we need to seek highs in other ways because we're not having this same evocative connection with everyone else on the dance floor. And I'll end it with this quote, which comes from the book. I didn't write the book, by the way. John, our director, wrote the book based on his research, and again in the context of being just after the pandemic lockdown, and also in reference to and in the context of what's happening literally today, right now, like not too far away from us, which, I don't know, it just seems so weird to be on a panel here talking while there's literally genocide going on. But it's in times like these that the unifying potential of the dance floor can truly be realized. I really like this quote, and that's how I want to finish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. And it seems like we are like going down in scale, and now we're going to a very specific building that is an institution in this city. We were talking before the talk that actually has been there for 80 years, which is a very long.
A lot.
It's many nights of dancing. It is many experience. It is many songs, many bands. Of course, I'm talking about Sala Apollo. And Apollo, I think, is both a traditional club in the sense of a traditional room for concerts. I'm sure many of you or most of you have been at some point. But they've also been doing some interesting experiments lately, like, for instance, blurring the lines between the club and the gallery, the art gallery, as an institution that actually can collide in different ways. Of course, they have seen the transformation of what happens on the stage, and we're talking about how the increasing importance of lights and visuals have changed their work many ways. We are really thankful for Nayara, who probably is the most busy person in this stage this week, for taking time for being in this conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, of course, and for being here. It's a really pleasure, and it's really, really interesting. I hope I'm there. Well, actually, I don't know. I guess you all, if you're here and from here, Barcelona, you know Apollo. Sala Apollo is it's a music venue, live music venue, but also a nightclub with a lot of programming. And we open for club nights every night. So we have like at the afternoons gigs, and then at night we open. So we have a lot of work, and it's open almost 24 hours a day with a lot of stress, what that means. So it's this year we are 80. It's our 81st anniversary, so it's a really, really old building, and it's nice because it was meant to be a ballroom, and it is still a ballroom, even though it looks like a theater, because actually people come here. Was this a cabaret? No, it was not a cabaret. It has always been meant to be a ballroom, and it still is. So we are really, really proud of that, and that we can, after all these years, we can still say, hey, we are there, putting live music, helping new talent, and, you know, shaking the scenes and from Barcelona, no? So, well, that was. Do I have my thing? No, pues no tengo nada. No, sí. Ay, vale. Okay, I think this is a video when we were on the 75th anniversary. We did this spot, and I think it is a very good resumen of what Apollo has been. So maybe we can see it from the beginning. I don't know. ¿Sí? Okay. No se oye nada. Vale. Wait. How can we put sound on this? Without sound, it makes no sense. Hola. ¿Algún técnico me puede ayudar? Okay. ¿Empieza o no? Is it okay? No sound. It's not possible? Que no hay sonido. Okay. Well, it's a pity because it's really it's important of the video. That is the facade. It's an iconic facade. It's maybe you know better. And this is actually how it is right now and how it was built. So it's really intact. Apollo is situated in Parallel. Parallel was it still has a lot of theaters, but at the beginning of the 19th century was a really a street where everything happened at night with cafes, and everybody went there to have fun at Parallel. So it was on the core of the busy Barcelona. And then it was transformed. We had, as I said, it has always been a ballroom. So they had a live show with live bands playing, and you will see the transformation in all this 75 years of the people that have actually, well, it's a video, of course, but and then it's without sound. It's weird to see all this. And all these parties from the underground scenes that were held there, not only queer parties, but it was really a place for as you said, for communities to be there and to stay there, and also it has been very important for bands because Apollo has been putting gigs and live bands since Alberto was programming, of course, and then many important bands have come to Apollo. And then, of course, the DJs at club nights with Nitsa. Nitsa has been the reference electronic club for years in Barcelona, and it has, okay, let's see, Apollo. Tot canvia, res canvia. This is a lot. Y estrella ahí por ahí. Sorry. Well, anyway, what I wanted to say is that actually Apollo has been transforming the city, but itself, the building, it has not been transformed. So we did a survey in 2017 asking people that came to Apollo, how did they define Apollo? And the word that everybody or most of the people said that was home. And that was so satisfying because it was like they felt very comfortable coming to Apollo, not only because what they experienced there as club nights or gigs or what they discovered, but I think it has that sense, the whole building, the whole aspect of going there and socializing. They feel safe. They feel when you're at home, you feel safe. It's a safe space for you. It's comfortable, and you are with family and friends. So it's the same. So what happened was in 2018 we had a very big renewal of the venue, and rethinking the venue, how it had to be renewed, because it was very nice to listen to all that, but we cannot forget it's a business. So when we are thinking about renewing a club or renewing a live stage or a building like that, we have to think about the business also, because it's, I mean, when you're thinking about rebuilding a new venue, because La Dos, Apollo, I will show you now, is completely new. Of course, you have to think of the bars also, right? So this is the Apollo, the facade, the old facade, and the old elements that still are on the upper floor. So Apollo is like on the first floor. You have to go through through a staircase, and then beneath, we rebuilt in this big renewal that we did. Rebuilt a second La Dos. There was a small venue with 350 cap, and now we enlarged it to 1,100 cap. So it's right on abajo, underneath, yeah. So when they had to think about doing the new club and rethinking a whole new venue, they had to think about the sound, they had to think about many stuff, but without, of course, thinking of, we sell drinks. And and it's one of our main incomes. So we have to think about all that, not only the experience and music and dancing, and it's really not romantic, but it's finally it's true. So this is the main hall. As I told you, it's 1,600 cap, but for gigs we only put 1,300, because if you are upstairs on behind, you don't see the stage. And the stage has been built like that, and it stays, but we do several formats. We have been doing gigs in the center of the platea. So, but it's hard for the sound engineers to put the sound, in the center, a gig and a band, and for them it's really, really stressing for the technicians. And of course it's much simpler to put them on stage. And this is the new venue, the underneath venue. It's completely different. So when the time came to rethink about a new venue, the atmosphere is completely different. It's industrial 100%. It's dark. It's black. Nothing to do with the cabaret, teatrillo, what people thought it was Apollo, and we have upstairs with wooden floor and everything. So the thing is that they are complement. And when we have club nights, normally we open both floors at the same time, so people can go from one place to another, and it's really, really complementary. So I think it's the perfect match, actually, because we have like an old, inspiring venue and very cozy, and you have this dark black venue underneath where you can put other stuff. But when we did the renewal, we needed to solve some problems, and that was with the neighbors. So what did we do? We had two problems. Noise problems with the neighbors, of course, and because people were queuing, and because we have a lot of programming at the afternoon and at night, people were queuing on the street. And that is really annoying of course, for neighbors and everybody. So within the renewal, the adjacent edificios, buildings that had Apollo, instead of becoming new venues or transform them, what we did was okay, let's think about the problems we really have and how can we solve them with this. So we built a really, really big hall where we can do the queuing inside, so less problems with the neighbors. And the second, what we did, the other, another building that we just adjust to what Apollo is, it's a patio where people could smoke. So we solved two problems at the time, the queuing and the smoking, because people had to go outside to smoke. And those are practical things that are hard, that you also have to think about when you are, defining or building or thinking about. I know they're practical and they're not, but they are very necessary. So with the patio that we have, of course, there is a bar also, but it's not a venue. You cannot put live music there, but it is perfect for people to, it's big enough for people to smoke and to socialize, and they can talk because there's no music. So, it's unstressed room, and it's connected to both venues. So it's really a relief when you want to, get out of the club that is really noisy. You go there, you you smoke a cigarette, you talk, and that was really important. And that, I think, was really clue for the venue. To have that space was crucial for us to to get along well with the administration, of course, and for the audience to be able to give that, that new space. And after the renewal, we have a really, this is the patio. It's also industrial. We can't, because it's open air. We cannot do it. It's a pity because it's so nice during the daytimes. but it's a pity we cannot put music or whatever. And this is the main hall, the big hall that I was talking about, where we have the cloakroom and we do the cues. Well, this is y ahora como vuelvo para atrás.
La otra, la contraria.
Ahí está, aquí. Vale, no. Joder, macho. Bueno, pues no sé cómo se hace esto. Porque tengo más fotos, pero no. Ah, ¿las puedes poner ahora? Vale, ok.
Ve acabando, ¿eh?
Sí, okay. So now we have another very small room that is also open during club nights. That it's like a cocktail bar. So we have been building these spaces to solve our problems, to see how people could be more comfortable in their home. So I think we cannot. I mean, when you are defined by your programming, by your values that stand up in front of you, like we really work very hard to be a safe space and everything. When we work those values, I mean, it's really hard to. It's really important to keep them, and your space has to talk for that. So we think a lot about the people and that are there. And the last thing I just want to know, we have a project going on that is called AMA, Art Meets Apollo, that it's really interesting because what we do is we tell emerging and consolidated artists that are based in Barcelona to ¿cómo se llama? To put art or to do art or their own or installations in the common parts of Apollo, not in the dance floor, not in the venue, but on the corridor, on the hall, on La Tres, and it's really it's becoming. This is the new small room we have. It's like a cocktail bar, and it's not noisy at all. It's with puffs and everything. And this new project that combines art and club nights and club sessions, it's really now becoming important. We have a lot of artists that want to participate, and it's giving the audience the possibility of looking at art that they're not going to galleries. It's hard for very, very young people to go to galleries. They don't know even the way. They don't know if it's free or not, or they have to pay. But bringing the art in the venue, it's more. It's democratizing culture actually, and it's helping both the whole sector. So that is our new project, and it's really getting big now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have very little time, too close to almost no time at all, but I didn't want to throw you at least a question. It's interesting, and I think that has been shown in all the conversation, that on one level there are things that never changes, that some of these institutions are literally millenary, but then on the other way there is a will to change. There is like a desire to imagine new possibilities, new ways of doing. So how do you imagine the club of the future? How do you imagine the auditorium of the future? And this is for all of you. Irene,
Me?
Yeah.
Like crowdsourced, collective. I mean, imagine. I don't think this is realistic because it's not financially successful, but it's hopeful. I think we really need to see clubs that are for everyone, people of different abilities. I think we need to see spaces that can platform different types of performances and different types of art, multifunctional spaces, temporary spaces.
Yeah.
That's all, yeah.
I guess I have no idea. To quote Chuck D, the future of Public Enemy is. But I do think that I have a feeling, though, that whatever it is will be an intense experience, because there will be so many temptations for people not to go see other people. the feelies, I think there'll be so much, the convenience of having an experience completely for you, exactly tailored to your wants, is going to be so huge that there has to be something that will coax people away from whatever it is, the device that is giving them entertainment, and into a public space. It's going to have to be really great. So I think in that way I'm very optimistic that there will be these interesting new experiences that people will develop in the future to get them into the street.
Can I interrupt though? Sorry, but like, don't you feel that people will still crave that human contact? And don't you think that was proven in the pandemic? Like, we were isolated to our screens and our personalized entertainment experiences. And I think this like very dystopian vision of the future is like in a club with like a VR, I don't know, this or just in your room with this like...
Or in digital festival browsers.
Festival but it was proven, the festivals that went online during the pandemic, like it wasn't fun, it wasn't successful. Like, I don't know if anyone actually like went to one of those and enjoyed them. I certainly didn't. And I think it proved that, and which gives me so much hope, that won't happen and that people will continue to want and need this like physical human experience.
I would say...
How do you imagine Apollo in 80 years?
I imagine it the same. No.
Some things don't need to change.
No, it has to change. But I think the Club of the Future should be permeable to all the needs and all what's happening, because we have to know that a club is a place for freedom to express yourself. So it has to be still that way. So a club cannot, just as you said, it has to be created by people and for people and with the artists. But I think it has to, actually breathe and still continue breathing all that sense of freedom and stuff. And permeable to now, safe spaces are very important. The queer community and it has to be. It's more. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be with architecture. Sorry, but it has to be permeable to all of that. But it does, because now we are thinking about the bathrooms, because it's for women and men. Binary. And how do we do that? We didn't think about that before. So now we have to think about that when it comes to redesigning everything. No? So I guess the Club of the Future has to be and has to to take all that and put it in the club. Yeah.
In 1994, in this same building in which we are right now, a music festival started. Sonar introduced the idea that a museum could turn into a rave, and actually kind of like put upside down, even before that, big cultural institutions like MoMA PS1 in New York did it. The idea that a cultural institution, which is like one kind of a space, could become another space. It would be fascinating to imagine the people who went to Apollo 80 years ago entering in the Apollo of today. See what they would recognize and what they wouldn't.
But they would recognize, of course, a lot of things and others no. But it's interesting.
Are we out of time? Because we're out of time. So we will be at the entrance, I think, or at the bar or something, because this conversation is still very long. It's at the bar, definitely. The most famous quotation by Lester Bangs of music criticism, is this thing of that talking about, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. So we were trying to talk about music and architecture. Now we're going dancing. Thank you, everybody.